Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football. My name is Scott Morgan, from Motor City Madmouth. Glad to have my co-host, Ryan Skolrud. Ryan, what you got lined up for us tonight?
Well, definitely a full amount of news for this week. A lot going on. We'll start it off. The big news that happened this week was Le'Veon Bell getting released by the Jets. I've seen a lot of Jet fans. I know a lot of Jet fans wondering why Adam Gase was not the one released instead of Le'Veon Bell.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah. We got the official news. I believe I got it about an hour ago that Le'Veon Bell is going to be signing a 1-year deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, a lot of people are going to freak out about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Was he really the guy? Yes, he is really the guy. I think that what's going to happen with Bell is Bell at this point in his career was used so much in Pittsburgh and had such a bad offensive line in New York that I believe that Bell is more coming in as the kind of that Darrell Williams role than he is to take over too much from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just looking at the stats, Edwards-Helaire is actually on pace between receiving and rushing he's on pace for over 1,600 yards on the season. But he's only had 7 carries inside the 5-yard line. Only one of them was he anywhere close to being able to get into the end zone. On 6 of them, the defense basically just bust through the line and there was nowhere for him to go. So I'm not completely phased by Le'Veon Bell going to Kansas City. Now, it very well could cut into a little bit of Edwards-Helaire's workload, but it's not something that stresses me too much as of right now. If anything, I think having a veteran like Bell there, who played the same kind of game as what they're trying to do with CEH in Kansas City, runs that same type of game, I think it could provide some opportunity for him to learn from a veteran. So whether Le'Veon Bell takes on that kind of role or not, I don't know. Moving on, the second big thing that happened, I believe it was yesterday, was Melvin Gordon getting arrested with a DUI. And he was back at practice today. The thing that I saw with him in terms of the ownership was that they were at least impressed with the fact that as soon as it happened, he immediately called the team. He immediately called the coaches, called John Elway to let them know what happened. Apparently, he was out to dinner, had some wine at dinner, and then decided to drive home when he probably shouldn't have, and in the process, got pulled over for going was like 25 to 35 miles an hour over the speed limit, something like that. And when you've got a little bit of alcohol in your system, they're gonna hit you hard for that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of league discipline, in terms of team discipline. If anything, I think that this opens up a bigger shot for Phillip Lindsay, who's just now coming back off a toe injury, who had the extra week off because of the because the Broncos and Patriots game getting pushed back a week. So that helps him. For right now, I would be cautiously optimistic, very cautiously optimistic, on whether or not Melvin Gordon plays this Sunday. A lot of caution in that optimism, to the point where I would, if you can get Phillip Lindsay on your team as a backup just in case, I think that would be the prudent thing to do. I don't exactly have his roster, the percentage of leagues that he's rostered in, but I definitely think it would be, like I said, it would be a prudent thing to have Phillip Lindsay there just in case. Moving on, next, DJ Chark missed practice again on Thursday, dealing with an ankle injury. And the real reason I bring this up, obviously, if Chark can't play, you're not going to start him. If he can, you are going to start him, unless you're in like an 8-team league and every team is stacked. In 10 to 12-team leagues, if DJ Chark is playing, you're probably going to start him. I think he's a top 15 wide receiver. The issue is if the fact that he hasn't practiced 2 days in a row, Wednesday and Thursday. The big issue is anyone who wants to try to stream Gardner Minshew as their streaming quarterback because they've got a bye week. This week, looking at the bye weeks, I know that at least Russell Wilson is on bye week. I don't have. Let me pull that up. The other players that are on bye week this week are the Chargers, the Saints, and the Raiders. So Derek Carr, Drew Brees, Justin Herbert, who has been a huge pickup for fantasy players who've been willing to get him. So if Chark can't play, you don't want to go anywhere near Gardner Minshew because the production for Gardner Minshew has all centered on DJ Chark being in the offense because he provides so much value. He can pull a double team and still be productive and allow the other players, the other receivers, to take a little bit of the heat. Now, I understand they're going up against the Lions, but again, if Chark isn't there, I believe that allows the Lions defense to focus a little more broadly and really be able to hold down Minshew in the passing game.
Yeah, I've seen the Chark-Minshew combination all too much, and I know that they're very dangerous for sure. So.
Yeah, and honestly, the one game that Minshew has had where he did not play well, and really just had a hard time getting the offense going, was the game that Chark missed.
Right,
it was against Miami. Every other game, he has scored at least over 19 and a half points per game in fantasy. That one game that Chark missed, he scores only 10. So Chark is a big part of that offense, and if he's not there, I'm not willing to risk Gardner Minshew. So
makes sense.
Moving on, Cam Newton officially returns to practice. He is off the COVID list and ready to go. So for those of you who have had to struggle trying to find a quarterback, I had one league where I had Cam Newton and Ryan Tannehill at the same time go out because of COVID-related issues for personally or their team, and had to pick up Nick Mullins, I think, for one game. That's how rough it's been for me in a couple of my fantasy leagues. But no, Cam Newton is back, and he is one of the top quarterbacks right now in terms of fantasy, in terms of play and total points. I'm bringing it up to see his actual point scores here. He is based on points per game. I want to say he's still top 6. So he is definitely a guy that you're going to want to continue to use. Just being kind of rejuvenated in this offense. Going to New England, he's going up against a tougher defense in terms of the Broncos. And it will be, but again, at least it's at home. The Broncos against quarterbacks do give up a lot of points to quarterbacks and wide receivers, and they are known for shutting down the run game. So that should still provide opportunity for Cam Newton to still put up fantasy points in the passing game. So,
okay.
Moving on, Dalvin Cook is not practicing again today with the injury that he suffered, where he went out. I think it was first play of the third quarter in that Sunday night game against Seattle.
Right.
Tweaked his groin, had to come out of the game. Came back out 2 series later. I think went in for one play and immediately came back out of the game. I do not think that the I mean, I've heard the coach speak. Yeah, we'll see how he's feeling. It's not a definite that he's not going to play. I don't see Minnesota playing Dalvin Cook this week. I understand that they need the win. They're what? Oh, I think they're. Are they 1-4 now?
1-4.
1-4. So I understand they need the win. It's going to be a tough road for them to come back from already with where they're at. That being said, I wouldn't want to risk their high-priced running back if they don't need to, especially considering they're going up against an Atlanta team that is traveling, is 0-5, doesn't really have an identity on defense whatsoever except giving up a lot of yards and a lot of points. And the offense has struggled a couple of weeks. Mind you, that was against a couple of better defenses. Julio Jones has been out. And so if the Vikings can solidify their defense, which they seemed to do, at least for the first half against Seattle, it could provide the opportunity for them to come out with a decent win in this one. And seeing that Alexander Mattison is extremely capable, I have no problems with the Vikings sitting Dalvin Cook for this week and running Alexander Mattison. Mattison should have been one of the top waiver pickups for this week if you're desperate for a running back, especially for Dalvin Cook owners. He showed last week against a Seahawks defense that going into this was top 5 against the run, and he put up 100 yards and 17 carries. Plus caught the ball, or maybe I think it was 110, 112 yards on 17 carries. So he is extremely capable and should be in for another solid game against the Falcons, who just gave up a ton of rushing yards and receiving yards and touchdowns to Mike Davis last week against Carolina. So I think that Madison should be in for a huge game. I don't think, personally, that the Minnesota Vikings will risk Dalvin Cook. If they do say Dalvin Cook is going to be healthy, I'm still, as a Dalvin Cook owner, looking to possibly play someone else for fear that he may re-aggravate the injury. So,
okay.
Odell Beckham Jr. was sent home from practice today with an illness. We are not sure what it is. I believe, from what I have been able to find, it looks like it may have just been a little bit of a stomach bug, that he wasn't feeling good. So they don't think it's COVID related, but they sent him home anyways just to be safe. So we should hear back in the next day, Friday, possibly even Saturday, what's going on, whether or not he'll be active for the game against the Steelers, which I figure he'll probably be active against the game on Sunday against the Steelers. So one or two other things. John Brown and Zach Moss were both back at practice today for Buffalo in terms of a walkthrough. Zach Moss has been both these guys missed this last game against Tennessee. I believe John Brown has been dealing with a calf injury or an ankle injury. I can't remember which. While Zach Moss has been dealing with a toe injury, kind of a turf toe issue. We'll see if Zach Moss is ready to go. Devin Singletary has been performing pretty well in Zach Moss's absence. Moss's absence has allowed Singletary to get a lot more volume. If Zach Moss is back, I still don't know how to judge the relationship between those two in the backfield as far as fantasy goes. Okay. The guy to own as of right now is still Singletary. So we'll kind of wait and see on that. John Brown has been a top – he's still in the top 25, I believe, in terms of wide receivers, especially in terms of wide receivers and points per game. So if he is healthy to go for Buffalo this week, going against Kansas City, I think that he should be in for a decent game. I believe that game Monday night is going to be a bit of a high expected score in that game. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my notes. So my overall notes for just kind of what's going on right now.
Okay.
I've been trying to figure out what's been going on in the NFL overall in terms of how to judge certain players, kind of trying to look at the statistics to see why certain things are happening. And so I've actually been going through For those of you who've never used it, Next Gen Stats on NFL. It's not as, I know they talk about, you hear the on ESPN and on NFL.com and the broadcast, you hear about Next Gen Stats all the time, them talking about it. Well, you can actually go to I think it's nfl.nextgenstats.com, I believe is the website, and use and it has a pretty significant amount of information that you can look at. It's not nearly as expansive as what they're talking about on the broadcast. However, they do have a lot of things on there that can really help you figure out what's going on, and kind of why things are happening. So starting with the quarterbacks, just some observations that I've seen. Russell Wilson is an animal. It's the only way I can put it. He is in the top in terms of quarterbacks. This isn't fantasy stats. This is actual stats. Russell Wilson is in the top 10 right now in terms of time to throw, which, surprise, surprise right there, that's never been a thing for Seattle. Wilson is always in one of the lower, in the lower third in terms of time to throw. The Seattle offensive line has gotten so much better this year in giving Russell Wilson time to throw. That's what's helping provide a lot of these statistics. He's in the top 10 in terms of, or in the bottom 10 in terms of aggressiveness. Now, this aggressiveness percentage, this is an interesting thing for me to look at, because this has helped me kind of realize why certain guys are throwing more interceptions than others. And the aggressiveness percentage, it's based on how close a defender is to the wide receiver at the point of contact when the ball is either completed or incompleted. And based on that, Russell Wilson, it also goes to show how good his wide receivers are. His aggressiveness percentage is only 8.3%. So only on 8.3%, less than 10% of his passes, is there someone within 1 yard of the receiver when the ball gets there.
Right.
You look at guys like Aaron Rodgers is close behind. Aaron Rodgers is at 14.4%. And then you look at guys that are really struggling. Daniel Jones, 20.9%. Mitchell Trubisky, why he got benched, 31% of his passes were to guys that are basically got someone all over them. Nick Foles isn't far behind at 23%. So just kind of looking at some of these stats, just seeing why things are playing out the way they are. Patrick Mahomes, only 12%. So again, one of the things that I'm looking at in terms of quarterbacks for fantasy, especially in terms of streaming guys, looking at how aggressive they are and how is that playing out. Are they being aggressive but being successful? Or are they being aggressive and it's causing turnovers? Another guy on that not very aggressive list is Teddy Bridgewater. But he's thrown for 1,400 yards, almost 1,500 yards in 5 games. That's not something I ever would have thought Teddy Bridgewater would be close to the top in the league in passing yards. Especially looking at his time to throw is in the bottom 10. His completion, his average completion is 5 yards. His average his average air yards per completion is 5 yards. So 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. His average intended air yards is only 6.6. So he's throwing nothing but short passes. But he's got playmakers that are making it happen. So those are just some observations in terms of the passing game. The running game, it's very interesting to me that a lot of people are worried about Derrick Henry in terms of fantasy production right now. Because of the fact he hasn't put up a ton of yards. He's in the top 10 in terms of running backs. Top 10 in terms of running backs scoring in fantasy. Top 10 in rushing yards. Part of the reason for that is because I think he's second or third in the league. Third in the league for rushing attempts. He's only averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Now you look at what he did last year, putting up 1,500 yards rushing. He was having more games of rushing for 100 to 150 yards. He has not been doing that this year. And even the one game I think he had, what was it? I want to say Tennessee against Denver. he ran for 100 yards, but had 30 carries in the game.
Yeah.
And so looking at Derrick Henry, I think from what I'm seeing, Derrick Henry will explode later on in this year. Because right now, his one of the stats that they use is rushes beyond expected, or rushes beyond or over expected yardage. And so his percentage right now is only about 40% of the time is he running beyond what the expected rush should be. And they base, again, Next Gen Stats bases that on where players are, how much running room he has, when he gets the ball, and that sort of thing. And so he's very much in the middle of the road there. But another thing to remember is that he gets a lot of short yardage carries, which helps the touchdowns as well. And so I think that it's going to come to the point where they're going to start opening up more lanes for Derrick Henry to get loose. Once that happens, he's going to have another. I think he'll have another second half of the year like he did a couple years ago, where he had 4 games in a row rushing for 150 yards. So yeah, those. That was one of my observations there. Guys like Raheem Mostert, I know people get frustrated with injuries in fantasy football, but Mostert is not a guy that you want to just let go. I understand that, again, San Francisco's not been good, but they still have the same offense. They're still going to use a lot of the run game. When Mostert is healthy, he's averaging over 7 yards a carry. I mean, the guy is an absolute animal when he's got the ball. He's in the top 10 in terms of yards per carry, rush yards over expected, percent of rush yards over expected. He's only got 1 TD, and he's been injured. So, again, looking at those kind of things are just, for me, guys like Raheem Mostert are guys to hold on to. One of the guys that kind of gets a little demonized, David Montgomery in Chicago. He's just never really been able to put it together. We've never seen the explosion from David Montgomery that we've been expecting. And part of the reason behind that is he doesn't he's not very efficient in getting to the line of scrimmage. And he faces and he hasn't been facing a whole lot of he hasn't been facing a whole lot of 8-man boxes, which is amazing. He only faces an 8-man box on 8% of his carries. What I think is going to help him out is the fact that Tariq Cohen is gone. He's going to get more pass catching. And so, again, that's another guy that I think that it's not going to get a lot better for David Montgomery, but it is going to improve a little bit. So,
yeah.
And then going to the wide receivers, again, I know that some of this may seem monotonous, but just looking at the deep dive, the stats actually do speak. DK Metcalf, again, is an absolute monster. Going over some of what DK Metcalf has done, he is 3rd in the league in teams' air yards, which basically is a measurement to see how many deep balls for the team a receiver gets. And he's only behind Adam Thielen and Marquise Brown. And so Marquise Brown gets a lot of those deep passes, again, but he doesn't get into the end zone. He's only got 1 touchdown. And they base their offense off the run game. So just things, again, those are just kind of some things that stood out to me. DK Metcalf, I think, is going to finish. He's already, I want to say, wide receiver 6. He's going to finish in the top 5 this year unless there's an injury. That's just the way it's going to be. And he has, for the most part, taken over Tyler Lockett as the number 1 receiver in this offense. And, moving back to Tyler Lockett, one of the things that's interesting to me is his targets are not as deep this year, and he's not getting as many yards after the catch. DK Metcalf is getting deeper passes and more yards after the catch, which is explaining why he has so many yards, why he's getting more touchdowns this year. So, so those are some of the main things I saw in terms of the wide receivers. Allen Robinson is again, I think he's part of Allen Robinson's issues. While he's getting a lot of volume, it's the quarterback situation. I think that Allen Robinson, if he ever had a quarterback that could get him the ball on time, accurately, he would blow up again for another 1,400 yards like he did, 4 years ago with Jacksonville.
Right.
he's not getting that in Chicago. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't see him staying in Chicago this year, after this year. I think that he goes somewhere else. I think that he finds a contract somewhere else. So,
All right, let me go over some things here. First of all, all right, there we go. So, no, I enjoy your perspective. You put things in perspective numerically, and anybody that listens and watches this broadcast should take your research and do what they can with it, because I know you put a lot of time into it. So, question number one to you. Does Le'Veon Bell do a whole lot with social media, and do you think the Chiefs are going to be able to tone him down a little bit and let him focus on what he does on the field instead of what he does on social media? Can this guy ever settle down in social media?
I don't think he'll ever settle down on social media. That's his personality, and I think that knowing the Chiefs and the players that they have in their locker room, as well as players that they have had in their locker room, I don't think they cared about whether or not he's going to be active on social media and possibly be mouthy on social media. In terms of production, I don't know. Again, talking about that earlier. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the only reason he's not in the top 10 running back conversation in terms of fantasy is he just hasn't gotten in the end zone. Like I said, he's on pace for 1,600 yards. He's averaging over 100 yards a game combined, running and passing, or running and receiving. He is involved all over. They just haven't been able to get him into the end zone. And when they run their short yardage, their short yardage, the offensive line has not been able to open things up. Now, in terms of Le'Veon Bell, I find it interesting because he's a very patient runner. He has always been one of those guys that takes his time and lets the holes come to him. With this offense, I'm interested to see how he does in this offense in terms of running the ball. If they use him in the pass game, I think he's going to be very effective. In terms of fantasy production, I think he'll be no more than a flex play unless something happens to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire moves from that running back 1, running back 2 threshold to a more solid running back 2. But I don't think it's going to eat into his production enough to really knock him down much lower than that.
Let me tell you, Le'Veon Bell, you know who he reminds me of? Way before your time, Billy Sims for me, the Detroit Lions. He used to be a very patient runner, but yet powerful. Take the two P's, patient and powerful. And Billy Sims waited. That's when he knew what he had to do. He was a sensational running back over at University of Oklahoma. Then again, the Sooners produce a lot of those anyhow. And that's based on what you're telling me about Le'Veon Bell. Billy Sims stands out to me. We've had a couple of coaching changes in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Bill O'Brien's out and Romeo Crennel produced a win for the Texans. Now the same holds true out in Atlanta where Dan Quinn is out, Raheem Morris is in. How much do coaching changes impact a lot of what you do in the fantasy world?
They impact a little bit because you tend to get a little bit of a boost in player production when a coaching change happens, especially when it's someone like a Bill O'Brien who's been a fiery character, which in a lot of cases has provided some consternation and some infighting in the locker room. We saw the reason that he got canned. The final straw was the fact that he got into an argument with J.J. Watt during practice. So, I think the fact that he was gone, I think it lifted a little bit of the kind of the cloud over Houston, over the Texans, and allowed them to produce a little bit more. I wasn't expecting them to do what they did, especially Brandon Cooks. And I know he's capable of it, but just we see it so rarely, to be honest. So I it does play a little bit of a factor. So it'll be interesting for me to kind of see what's going on with Atlanta. I'm
Right.
still looking at it over the next couple days, but I'm definitely looking at the possibility of them coming up just a little bit in terms of their offense, especially in terms of their offense. I think their defense is in trouble just because they've had so many injuries. But I think in terms of their offense, I think that it could be a little bit of a boost for their offense, especially considering how much the Minnesota defensive backs have struggled this season.
Yeah, Rich McKay went on record the other day when he was on Keyshawn Johnson's show that this is an 11-game audition for Raheem Morris. So we'll see if Raheem can make the most of it or not. And I think the one guy that I think is a great fit for Houston when the time comes to be Eric Bieniemy. He'll be on a lot of people's lists for sure. He'll be rewarded for his work out in Kansas City for sure. So, I mean, and Houston knows them all too well, having been ousted by the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
So when you look, I heard there's a rumor going on today that Sam Darnold could at some point probably wind up in Indianapolis at the trade deadline. I don't know if that's a rumor or not, but it's been talked about if the Jets continue to plummet as much as they are, because everybody's going after looking at Trevor Lawrence, and you have three teams that haven't won a game yet. I believe the Giants, the Falcons, and the Jets. And Trevor Lawrence's name is being bannered. How do you think Sam Darnold would do with Frank Reich out in Indianapolis?
Well, I think it would be great for Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Just to be away from Adam Gase. Let's start there.
Everybody getting away from Gase would be a fresh start.
I think it would be good for Sam Darnold. I think that a lot of what's happened with Sam Darnold in this offense, there's a lot of understandably frustrated Jets fans with how the offense has performed over the last couple of years, especially since Sam Darnold came. And for me, looking at kind of what all has happened, you can't blame it all on Sam Darnold.
Right.
When he's got an absolutely horrible offensive line that can't keep him upright. He's kind of, going back to some of my next gen stats in terms of his aggressiveness. He is another one of those guys that does not try to force the ball very often. His aggressiveness is down there.
Right.
I want to say it was like third to Russell Wilson and Teddy Bridgewater at only like 10.9%. So he's a guy that he does his best to find the open receiver. So for me, I think that Darnold getting a new coach, someone like a Frank Reich, who is very good with quarterbacks, and having more weapons around him to throw to, that alone would help out Sam Darnold. And let's not forget that the Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the league.
Right.
So.
Well, I had Jonathan Taylor do it. I mean, Frank Reich's effect has been felt in a couple organizations. The Eagles haven't been the same since Frank Reich left, number one. So there you go. I mean, you had Foles and Carson Wentz flourish, and all of a sudden, you see him out in Indianapolis. Of course, it doesn't hurt to have Jonathan Taylor in that backfield either. That'll be for another day.
That's true.
It's always good to have a good, solid running game. And Adam Gase is 0 for 2 with big-name quarterbacks. He did nothing for Ryan Tannehill. How did Ryan Tannehill do when he left Miami, Tennessee? You do the math, okay? He's done pretty well. And I could see Sam Darnold leaving, going anywhere to get away from Adam Gase, who I think will be the next one that goes real soon, which will segue to what I'm going to bring up in a moment. But I think Sam Darnold, I don't view him as a bust, and nor will I even view Dwayne Haskins as a bust if he can get out of Washington as well. But again, we'll talk about that down the road. It's just interesting to see that we've had a couple mid-season firings, and I have a feeling we could see a few more. Before we get on to this week's games, I want to go over one game from last week. Tennessee 42, Buffalo 16. Derrick Henry flattened Josh Norman with that stiff arm, one of the best stiff arms I've ever seen. I have a feeling that Josh Norman not only heard it from his coaches and his teammates, but how do you feel if you're Derrick Henry, and then how do you feel if you're Josh Norman, knowing you just got drilled, and it was a very legal hit too, a stiff arm. I mean, you know what? Derrick Henry sent him into tomorrow.
Yeah, I honestly don't think Derrick Henry cares. He's done it to so many guys. Just it doesn't take much. I mean, the guy is what, 6'4", 240 pounds, or 6'3", something like that. The guy's just a truck. And then, I mean, it doesn't take much to just stick his arm out, and he's just about anyone that tries to come at him is going to fall over. It's made for good memes. I've already seen a whole bunch of people, putting Josh Norman on a whole bunch of different things. It's just funny just seeing his body sprawled out. As far as Josh Norman goes, yeah, it's got to be one of those things you have to shake off. You tried to tackle a guy that was twice your size. It didn't go well. I think it's one thing to have that. It's another thing to to have the picture like Earl Thomas last year, where Earl Thomas got turned around and practically was the lead blocker for Derrick Henry as he was running down the field. So,
well, a play like that reminds me of what Bo Jackson did to Brian Bosworth. You're all too familiar with it. Your neck of the woods. And I love Bo Jackson as a running back, and I never liked Brian Bosworth because of his personality and all that. I've always felt that, to me, if there was a bust, he would definitely be viewed as one, but I believe he was taken in the supplemental draft. So I don't view supplemental draft choices as bust, but I'll tell you what, Bo Jackson made Brian Bosworth look very, very bad. So, hey, I was actually happy to see Henry go ahead and roll over. It just looked good. That's all. I mean, it'll make a lot of highlight reels, which is why we started off with it. All right, let's talk about 5 football games. Our new format's going to be on this broadcast. We're not going to worry about last week, except for maybe a game that stands out. And we'll focus on 5 that I have. And this Jacksonville Jaguars hat I'm wearing, folks, for you, those of you that wonder. I have a Lions hat that I wore on the Sports Exchange earlier, but I have to give both teams fair treatment, so I'm wearing my Jaguars hat. I'm covering the Jacksonville Jaguars Detroit Lions game up at TIAA Bank Field in Jacksonville. I have to tell you, the folks up in Jacksonville, their hospitality is great. And here's a little something for you folks out there, okay? I have spent more time in Jacksonville than any other press box around the National Football League. The only one that I spent more time with was the Pontiac Silverdome. I used to live at the Pontiac Silverdome on Sundays, Thanksgivings, and whatnot. So, and yet I live in the backyard of the Miami Dolphins. Yet I have a good working relationship with the folks in Jacksonville. So I'm looking forward to getting up there and being in my element in a press box, albeit 66% capacity up there. So obviously the protocols and what you're allowed to do is one thing, but I'm still looking forward to getting in there nevertheless. So let me lead into 5 games. If we can make predictions, we can do that. Detroit 1-3, Jacksonville 1-4. The Detroit Lions have an interesting stretch in these 2 weeks. They get Jacksonville 1-4, and then they have Atlanta, which right now is 0-5. To me, this is the Matt Patricia versus Doug Marrone Bowl. Okay, do I think Marrone could get another year with a young team? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not, depending how it looks. But Matt Patricia did not get fired after the bye week. But I'll tell you what, who's to say that if these next 2 games don't go well against Jacksonville and Atlanta, does he get the boot? So, Ryan, why don't you give me a prediction on the Lions and the Jaguars?
Well, with this game, I mean, the Lions' offense has really struggled. It doesn't help that Kenny Golladay missed the first couple games this season. And the Jaguars offense is going to center around the fact of whether or not DJ Chark is healthy. James Robinson has been a great story so far for this year. But it's kind of been the problem with James Robinson is the fact that the defense has been bad enough. They're 30th in defense in the NFL right now. The Jaguars are. The defense has been bad enough. They haven't been able to keep James Robinson going in the second half of games because they have to abandon the run in order to try to keep up.
Right.
Where you take the Lions offense hasn't been great. I mean, they start out hot and then just fall off and just the defense gives up, which is amazing because I think that I'm looking at NFL.com. It says that their defense is 9th, but I'm looking at their yards per game overall, and they're like the bottom 5 in overall yards per game. Wait, that's yards per game. There we go. So for me, yeah, so they're 9th in total yards given up. For me, in terms of the Detroit, they don't give up a ton of yards, but they give up big plays. They give up touchdowns. That's the problem. And so, especially from a fantasy point of view, which is, again, where I'm looking at it, Detroit, even though they're 9th in terms of giving up yards, they give up the 7th most amount of points to the quarterback, first amount of fantasy points to the running back, 8th most to the wide receiver. Where you've got Jacksonville, who gives up the 4th most amount to quarterback, 8th most to running backs, 13th most to wide receivers, and 5th most to the tight ends. Both of these defenses are terrible, especially for fantasy purposes. So I would expect this game to be pretty high scoring. That's the expectation. That being said, both teams could also just absolutely fall apart because the defenses have been so inconsistent, or the offenses have been so inconsistent this year. So, that being said, now that I've gone through every possible scenario, I think I would go with probably, honestly, I think that Detroit may still win this one. Again, for me, it depends on Chark playing. If Chark plays, I think Jacksonville wins it, say, 24-21. If Chark doesn't play, I put Detroit on this one probably 28-24.
Okay, well, right now I'm going to go with Jacksonville 27-21. I really am. And the reason why I'll do that is because Matt Patricia, to me, and I've said this on numerous broadcasts, does give up a lot of yards. He's too susceptible to the big play. And the Lions, to me, you bring in a defensive coach from New England, and Steve Ballesteri on the Wednesday edition of the Sports Exchange, and I have talked about it time and time again, have said, you know what, Matt Patricia, when you give up too many yards, of course they're undisciplined and they commit bad penalties, that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, it's an interesting quarterback matchup when you look at Gardner Minshew against Matthew Stafford. I think that'll be fun just to watch it in its own right. And I'll be anxious to see what Adrian Peterson does there. But I'll stay consistent tonight and get Jacksonville a 27-21 win over Detroit. I know my heart is gushing for it, but I'm in the business to try to be neutral and objective. And that's how I see these things. And the Lions having convinced me to believe otherwise. And again, the key is, like you said, if Chark is available and Minshew could have a big game. If he isn't, then, the Lions do have a puncher's chance. But this is a very important 2 weeks for Matt Patricia. Make no bones about it. When you get Jacksonville and Atlanta in back-to-back weeks, if ownership sees that Patricia can't win one or two of these games, that's bad. And Patricia will get lit up badly with the media. Not that he hasn't been toasted to begin with. And a guy that's won only 10 games and succeeded Jim Caldwell, who, by the way, was 9-7 when he was sent packing.
Yeah.
Figure it out, folks. That's exactly what you have. 4 more games to get to. Green Bay Packers 4-0 against the Tampa Bay Bucks 3-2.
Well, this is a game of two offenses that are pretty good overall. Especially in terms of yards. Their defenses, in terms of giving up yards, have been very good. The thing to look at for me is the Packers have been very balanced in terms of their offensive strategy, because they're attacking where they need to in order to win. So you look at their game against Atlanta, Aaron Jones didn't have a huge game, and they didn't have all their wide receivers. I mean, they were missing their top two wide receivers in Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard. And basically everything was running through passes to the running backs, to Robert Tonyan, and to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And yet they passed their way to a win in that game against Atlanta because of Atlanta's defensive backs are so bad against the pass. But when it came to playing against Detroit, they just let Aaron Jones run all over the place. So because of their offense and what they can do to teams, whether, no matter who they're going up against, they can find the weakness and work against it. I see the Packers winning this game against the Buccaneers. And I think the Buccaneers are in a little bit of trouble especially considering how they lost that game last week to Chicago. I was not expecting that at all. I mean, we were even talking about it, on the broadcast last week,
right.
As the game was going. Both me and Xavier were like, yeah, this game's probably going to be over. I mean, it's 13-3.
Right.
And the defenses, for the Buccaneers has done a good job of shutting down Chicago, and then it all turned around. So I think the Buccaneers have some things to figure out in their pass defense that need to be taken care of. Now, again, going back to the fantasy perspective, for Tampa Bay, they're very good against quarterbacks. They are pretty good. I mean, they're top 5 against quarterbacks in terms of giving up fantasy points, in terms of preventing fantasy points. Top 10 against running backs, middle of the road against wide receivers and tight ends. In terms of Green Bay is right at 16, middle of the road against quarterbacks, but they do give up a lot to running backs, middle of the road against wide receivers, but they haven't really faced a team that really has the quality of wide receivers that Tampa Bay has. So I think honestly that Green Bay wins this game. I think that they will be able to attack where necessary. And I think overall they're the better overall team, the better all-around team. So for me, I'm putting Green Bay on this one. I don't necessarily have a score. I'd say 26-21.
Okay. I mean, I'll just give scores. I know you get into more detail for obvious reasons because you have that here. What you do is centered around a lot more numbers. I can tell you right now, Aaron Rodgers can throw to my cats and he would still do pretty well. Okay. I mean, everybody leaned on the Packers for not going after a wide receiver in the first round. Let me tell you, they've been at this personnel game a long time, and they unloaded older guys and brought in new blood. This is his second year under Matt LaFleur, so to me, it's just a matter of getting used to what one another can do, and all this business about getting upset because they drafted his heir apparent down the road. Trust me, Jordan Love won't be ready for a while anyhow, any more than Rodgers was ready when Favre took over. So to make a long story short, I'll give the Packers a 33-25 win as well. And what Chris Berman would call the NFC North division. I remember when I was in college, the Battle of the Bays used to happen all the time. I used to love when the Lions played Tampa twice a year, and up until they changed divisions, it was always good to see these two rivalries. I'm going to tell you, Tampa used to draw some good crowds from the Wisconsin folks that were out in the Tampa Bay area. So Packers 33, Bucks 25. Cleveland Browns against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a Myles Garrett Bowl. I have a feeling that Myles Garrett will not blow a gasket in this game, and I have a feeling he will. If he misses any games this year, it won't be because he got suspended. It'll be because of COVID-19. So, but this I think could be the best game of the week.
I do too. I think that the Cleveland defense. Here's the deal, though. There's a major difference in terms of the defenses. The Steelers right now, in terms of total yardage, are number 1 in the NFL, just stopping teams up. They're 3rd in the league in terms of yards per game, only giving up 300 yards per game, while Cleveland, find them here, giving up 383. Cleveland's really struggled, especially in the pass. Pulling up in terms of fantasy points. They give up a lot to, quarterbacks, fifth most amount of fantasy points, third most to wide receivers, seventh most to tight ends. So they've done an okay job stopping up the run game, but they give up a ton in the pass game. And right now, with Big Ben, when he has got, while Juju has not done a lot, he has been productive. He hasn't been what everyone expected him to be in terms of being a wide receiver one. I think he's doing a very good job of being that second option, considering you have guys like, when he's healthy, Deontay Johnson, and now the big breakout from Chase Claypool. I think that's going to show a lot of opportunity for the Pittsburgh offense to put up points against Cleveland. Now it's a matter of, can Cleveland keep up with Pittsburgh? Now, Pittsburgh has done great in terms of not giving up yards, but they do give up a lot of touchdowns in the passing game. They give up the fifth most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. They're middle of the road against quarterbacks. They just do a great job against stopping the run game. Top 8 against the run. So a lot of that's, the Browns, we know, are very focused on the run game. Chubb is out for a few weeks, so it's going to be Kareem Hunt and D'Ernest Johnson. So we'll see what they can provide in terms of the run game to keep things going. But they're going to have to pass the ball. And if they can't use the run to set up the pass, I think Pittsburgh runs away with this one. So for me, I still think that Pittsburgh has this. I think they're the better overall team.
Right.
Maybe not. So for me, I'm probably giving Pittsburgh. I'd say Pittsburgh wins this. I think it could be a little bit tight. So I'll say Pittsburgh wins it 21-17.
Okay. Well, I'll give Pittsburgh 30-21.
Okay.
That's where I'll go with it. I think Cleveland, first time since 1994, when Bill Belichick was a coach, that they finished 4-1. And I think the Browns are spiraling in the right direction. They really do. Kevin Stefanski has done a good job. He's impacted 2 teams. Minnesota isn't the same. Of course, it doesn't help that Minnesota doesn't have Stephon Diggs either. But Stefanski was a wild card. So, and of course, he's tasked with getting Baker Mayfield on track. And I think Baker Mayfield came into this year a lot more focused and not worry about the extracurricular activity. So that's helped him out. So
I would agree.
Pittsburgh 30. Cleveland 21. 2 more games to go, and they're both on Monday night. Kansas City Chiefs against the Buffalo Bills. The only prediction I'll make is I don't think Josh Norman's going to get flattened the way he did. Who knows what's going to happen beyond that? But what's your take on the first 2 Monday night games? How does it feel, though, before you answer that question, not to have a Thursday night game and 2 Monday night games?
While it feels weird, it helps that I'm able to have a little more time to work on my rankings. For those of you who don't know, going over this again, I submit rankings to fantasypros.com. I'm part of their expert consensus and part of their expert accuracy rankings. So for me, I have to have at least Thursday's rankings in, and have a general ranking and have those Thursday players set before the Thursday game, because once that game plays, they lock wherever I had them. And then I've got to fit everyone else around them after that. Having games on only Sunday and Monday make it that much easier, because once everything locks on Sunday, it's all done, no changes, that's it. And so for me, I feel like I actually have time to rate everyone and look over it. So that's what I appreciate, not having a Thursday night game, but I miss Thursday night football. So,
well, that makes 2 of us, but that's okay.
So going into this game, this is the. I mean, you look at these 2 offenses just in terms of yards given up, and on defense, and what their offenses do. This is going to be a huge game. I don't see a lot of defense being played in this one, to be completely honest. I think that Buffalo bounces back from that game against Tennessee. And, I mean, we've got the number 2 offense in yards with the Chiefs against the number 4 offense in yards with the Bills, against the number 22 and number 22 defense and number 19 defense. This is going to be a high-scoring game. The number 2 and number 3 passing teams. And so I really think that this is going to be a chess match between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. So for me, I see this as a high-scoring game. Play everyone that you have that's going to be involved in this game in terms of fantasy points. I still think overall, I think the Chiefs are a little more seasoned and therefore may probably come out on top, even if it's being played in Buffalo. So for me, I'd say 35-28 Chiefs.
All right, I'll go Kansas City 30-20 is what I'll do. I think Kansas City ate humble pie against the Raiders, and they're mad. I think Buffalo is too after the way they lost to Tennessee, which, by the way, you talk about the Miami Marlins version of the NFL. The Tennessee Titans were out for a while, and they didn't miss a beat. They almost looked like they were rested and ready to go, as the Miami Marlins were. Well, I have a baseball note. I'm glad we can bring this up here. Congratulations to Don Mattingly, who won the National League Manager of the Year for the Marlins by the Sporting News. Well-deserved. Here's a man that went out there and had to deal with 174 roster moves and 61 players. So unbelievable. And actually, this Marlins team can be sustainable with the young players that they have and the way they built it. So Don Mattingly, I can tell you right now, it was a privilege to work with him. Of all the people I've ever worked with in baseball, he's unquestionably is one of the brightest and most even-keeled guys. It doesn't hurt he's from the Midwest, from Evansville, Indiana, either. So congratulations to Don Mattingly. Now back on football. Okay, again, you talk about the Chiefs being humbled by the Raiders. And remember, this, and when you think about the way things transpired, John Gruden was going to go for it on fourth down, or when the Chargers didn't do it, it bit them. So, but Kansas City's mad, and I think they're going to take it out on Buffalo. That's why I'm giving them the 10-point win. The final game of the night, it's actually a game that I saw many years ago when I lived in Arizona at Sun Devil Stadium, and I had a chance to talk to Jerry Jones and Emmitt Smith and a few people in the Cowboys locker room. But we have the Arizona Cardinals at Dallas to take on the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, by now, everybody knows that Dak Prescott's out for the year. It was an unfortunate injury. But you have a matchup featuring Kyler Murray and Andy Dalton. I'll tell you, this one here for you has to be one of the most interesting matchups in terms of reshuffling the deck, and I got to hand it to Jerry Jones. He actually looked like Jimmy Johnson this time because he made a smart move as a general manager when you lock up the hometown kid, Andy Dalton, who played right down the road in Fort Worth over at TCU. And I tell you what, I think Andy Dalton's going to do really well playing for the Cowboys. I really do. The redhead performed well in Cincinnati, despite the cast of characters he had. But I think that what makes Andy Dalton more desirable is he has a lot of wide receiver weapons. It wasn't Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, to name a couple. And it doesn't hurt to have Ezekiel Elliott in your backfield either. And who is it? CeeDee Lamb is also
CeeDee Lamb. Yep.
Right. So I'll tell you what, Andy has some pretty good targets, and he'll manage the game and he'll manage it well. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in football. So what's your take on Kyler Murray against Andy Dalton?
Well, I think that this game, it'll be interesting to see what the Dallas defense can actually do in terms of trying to stop people. Their defensive backfield is really beat up. And so that's not going to help the fact that they're going up against Kyler Murray when he's got DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk and then Larry Fitzgerald over the middle. So in terms of the Dallas Cowboys defense, they give up a ton to wide receivers. They give up a ton to tight ends. But Arizona doesn't use a tight end, so that helps. The Dallas Cowboys, with losing Dak Prescott, are going to have to change the offensive philosophy a little bit. They have to. Andy Dalton is a very capable quarterback, but he's not Dak Prescott. So they are going to have to rely on Ezekiel Elliott, rely on a little more ball control, and actually give Ezekiel Elliott the ball more. So it also helps that the Arizona Cardinals give up the 10th most amount of fantasy points to running backs. So this should be a huge game for Ezekiel Elliott. I think that Andy Dalton will be serviceable. And again, he's never had this many weapons to throw to, this many great weapons to throw to. So I think, and when was the last time he had an offensive line? I mean, I understand that the Dallas offensive line is not where they were a few years ago because of retirements and because of injuries. That being said, it's still better than some of those offensive lines that he had with Cincinnati. So I think that I can see Arizona still winning this game, but I think this is going to be a little more of a punch for punch type game. And
Right.
so I think I'm going to go Arizona. No, you know what? I'm actually going to go with Dallas because I think if they control the ball with Ezekiel Elliott, they'll take over the game. So I'm going to give Dallas Cowboys 31-28.
You know what? I'm going with the Cowboys, but I'm going with them 38-31. And you made my point for me. Thank you very much. Okay. Andy Dalton's got more weapons than he's ever had to work with. Anytime you got Ezekiel Elliott and those wide receivers. I don't know. I mean, I tell you what, I predicted the Cardinals would blow out the Lions, and the Lions walked in there and played pretty good football. So,
yeah.
But don't get me wrong. I like the Cardinals. They certainly have they have some good players, but I don't know why. They're going to rally around Andy Dalton. And more importantly, that division is for the taking, too.
Yeah, it is.
So, I don't know. Andy Dalton's going to get in the playoffs again. Maybe he'll get that playoff win after all. We're looking ahead of ourselves. But in that division, what can I say? So, there you have it. The 5 major games we have. Ryan Skolrud's giving you a lot of great information to process. So, I would encourage anybody that listens and watches this broadcast, my advice to you is get a notepad and paper and take notes. And if you don't get it the first time, feel free to watch it again and again and again. And with his ranking being what it is, shame on you if you don't. But so with that said, okay, Ryan, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, and we'll follow suit.
All right, so you can get a hold of me on skullkingsports.com. You can email me at ryan.skolrud@skullkingsports.com. You can also find us on Twitter, at Skull King Sports, on Instagram, Skull King Sports. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Ryan Skolrud, RyanSkolrud. You can also find our rankings not only on Facebook, but on our website, skullkingsports.com. You can also find me on Fantasy Pros, where you can find my expert accuracy rankings right now. Last week, I finished 10th on Fantasy Pros in terms of accuracy for the week. And I am now 24th in accuracy on Fantasy Pros. And again, for a little perspective, that includes guys from the Fantasy Footballers podcast, CBS, Yahoo, any Fantasy Pros, any major, and even a lot of the minor fantasy football advice places. A lot of them are part of that accuracy contest. So,
well, we're glad to have you doing it. This is our 3rd year doing this together as well. So, with that said, if you want to listen to the audio version of our broadcast, our fantasy show, you can do so at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. I'll repeat that again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. In terms of following us on social media, I'll give you plenty of ways to do that. You can do so at Twitter at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune. You can follow us there. Our YouTube channel, please subscribe to that. There's no cost to doing it, just a little bit of time, about a second and a half of your life when you find it to go ahead and click the button, subscribe, good to go. But the advantages of subscribing to the YouTube channel is you'll be able to listen to the Sports Exchange, No Limits, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, Real and the Rare, our fantasy football show, myself and Ryan Skolrud, and the South Florida Tribune podcast. We have sports shows and non-sports shows, so please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. We actually have a section in there for Motor City Monitor, which allows folks in the metropolitan Detroit area, my hometown, to go ahead and take a look. And we have a lot of updates from all the 4 major teams and then some. We also have our media distribution partners on there, as well as our columnists, and the broadcast can be look at under the WSAN drop-down, and you'll find every broadcast that we have on there as well. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Feel free to contact myself, or you can reach Ryan through here as well, and any questions, comments that you have pertaining to this, we'll make sure we get them on the air. And, of course, LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth, to connect with me. I believe, Ryan, that's how I found you, was on LinkedIn, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So, connect with me. I'll be more than happy to do that as well. Any comments that we get through the YouTube side, I certainly go ahead and respond back as quickly as I can. So, Ryan, great show today. I think this is one of our best shows ever, and I continue to enjoy what we do on a weekly basis, and I hope that our fans out there will benefit by all the hard work and time that we put in to bringing this every single week as well. So, any closing thoughts, Ryan?
No, that's it. I think just remember, again, and especially in fantasy football, remember you can't control what happens with COVID. You can't control what happens with injuries. You need to be able, again, be flexible, roll with the punches, and have fun.
And as far as I'm concerned, let me give you the COVID message. We do it on every broadcast. Folks, please mask up, social distance, use common sense, and be courteous to other people. If Nick Saban, can you believe that? Nick Saban got COVID-19, but Donald Trump, I don't care how big or small you are, anybody can get it. I know that even though I'm going to Jacksonville with the Lions and the Jaguars, I'm sure I could probably get it too. I hope not. But when you're around people, you do. I mean, I'm not going to stop living no matter what. You just have to take the necessary precautions that you have. So, folks, please mask up, wash your hands, do everything necessary, and be courteous of the other people. Because you know what? This virus isn't going away. We don't have a vaccine right away. And you see all the different things that are going on in the world of sports. The NHL and the NBA did an unbelievable job with the bubble. MLB is doing a really good job. They had to deal with the outbreaks. And college football and the NFL, they're dealing with their growing pains as well. So on behalf of Ryan Skolrud, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to bringing you our broadcast again next week. Good night, everybody, and have a great weekend. Enjoy your football.